Welcome back, everyone, to the GMS Magazine Podcast, depending when you're either watching or listening. You should watch because, let's face it, we are two very handsome men.
Yes, I after I saw a photo of me from the convention I attended, I ran into the bathroom and put on a big, thick coat of Just for Men to darken this up, and I clipped this thing up just so I could fight the onset of age.
So, yeah, by all means, do watch our videos. It's worth it. I think it's worth it.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. This is a podcast, vidcast, or whatever it is you're doing with us, all about role-playing games, board games, and the people who make them. And, of course, the people who play them from time to time, but mostly the people who make them. I am Paco Garcia. I'm still Paco Garcia, even though, my friends, I'm drinking a glass of wine, so I'm going to be slightly chattier than usual.
Well, this is I wish I was drinking wine. This is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. I was just realizing we have a great topic for next week. Right? I do. I realize if we can't get the individual we were talking about for the subject we want to talk about, I definitely think we should our next week's topic should be paid GMing and what you need and the tips of being a paid GM. I was trying to get this as an on stage conversation at the convention we were just at, but they did not have the time to squeeze it in. Instead, we did a tabletop game design group. But I think it would be neat to bring in one of the few GMs that are now close to making it their career, as they spend several months of the year moving from place to place. The individual, who's a very good friend of mine, is also the guy that headlines the D&D in a Castle, which is a streaming series that pops up occasionally. And as of July, he's booked solid for the rest of the year.
You know what? Good for him. And give me just 1 second, because my dog has decided to play with his bone on top of the noisiest bag in the freaking room that you cannot see because this is a virtual background. So
I can't hear it though. I did see his face pop up through the blue screen. It was just like a quick second. This dog materialized out of the background. It was just like a ghost dog.
Yeah, give me just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Sorry, humans. I buy this thing for Taika. This thing, even though I absolutely, just so you know, humans, I despise hunting, especially trophy or pleasure hunting. I think it's absolutely despicable and disgusting. But this is a deer antler, and is the best snack you can get for your dog because it will last them for ages. It is perfectly edible and it's very good for their teeth. It's only second best to ice cubes. However, they also have one drawback, and is that they are very noisy. So anyway, so yes, for next week, we're going to have a very good topic of conversation. And if we are not going to say who, just so we keep the surprise. But if you guys cannot make it, I have another couple of people who might be willing to come, which would be amazing. And we're going to talk about how the current set of, what do we call it? The current wave of US fascism is actually affecting the gaming queer community. I would like to find out more about that, because I bet that it is having quite an effect. So, even though I'm a little bit tipsy because I've had a glass of wine, celebrating that my husband has come back from the UK after nearly a month, and I was looking forward to seeing him. Yeah, but this is something that I cannot joke about. So yeah, I am. I am genuinely concerned about how things are evolving, if that is the right word, because I find this quite atavistic.
Unfortunately, then this is where it comes into being very, very personal, because my family, I have the vast majority of my extended family comes out of not out of Portugal, although I do have a large extended family in Portugal. It's mostly out of the U.S., specifically where they were living in Rhode Island, and now it's coming in. Now they've almost all shifted to Florida.
Ooh, ouch.
Because that's where the matriarch was living. She was very old, and that's where old people retire. They go to Florida, and she passed away 2 years ago, and a good number of the people are just staying there still. The issue, of course, is that the vast majority of my cousins have swung to the right. These are all they're the kids. They're first generation immigrants. Like kids, children of immigrants. Like their parents all came off the boat, same as mine. But they are also all very white, like me. I think they're slightly more olive than me. But it's just frustrating. And the funny thing is that a few of them don't. Like I was like, one or two of them don't post on Facebook, or either don't have Facebook posts or have removed me. The two that have remained make a mental note to not put. Like one of them, for example, has. So what you can do on Facebook, because people don't know, you can separate all your friends into different groups, close friends, acquaintances, and so forth. So a certain posts show up to certain people. He has. Whenever he posts his political stuff, he posts it to his acquaintances only, and doesn't post it to his immediate family. Like he intentionally makes posts that I can't see, or it's the other way around. But the point is that I like my sister told me she's been seeing some of his posts, and they're very alarming, but I never see them. So it's one of those situations where like he knows his opinions are unpopular outside of his circle of friends, so he doesn't bother sharing those opinions with those people. And just, it's an increasingly frustrating issue. Like I said, the election coming up is going to really decide. I think, like I said, everyone outside of America, and even a lot of people in America are all basically under the agreement that that the entire country is on borrowed time. I just hope I live long enough to see it collapse. And I don't really mean that negatively, because we've seen countries that have fractured, but have prospered as separate entities. When I was in Scotland, my girlfriend at the time was in Scotland, and I was against Scottish independence. But it was entirely selfish, because I could get an EU license, an EU passport, an EU immigration, so I could potentially immigrate to Scotland. But then the UK left the EU, and now at that point I was for Scottish independence, because Scotland, if it left the UK, would rejoin with the EU, and then I'd be okay again. Of course, this relationship didn't work out, but now I'm a person that's any country that has a large chunk of their population want independence, I say let them.
Agreed.
So, and the same thing, of course, we've had this situation numerous times with Quebec, the dominantly French Canadian province in a country that's predominantly not French. And the funny thing is, and this is where things get interesting. I don't know if you know history. There was at least one massive referendum on separation. There was only one vote. And guess who was allowed to vote on whether or not Quebec secedes?
Everyone but Quebec?
No.
Oh, okay.
Quebec only. I know. I was kind of hoping you'd feed into that. But yeah, what happens in a civilized society is that the people who want to leave, they're the ones that get to decide. So the Quebec separatist movement, which hasn't died, it's still there, but it's so faded to such an extent, very few people give them any worth. Because remember, the capital of Canada is in Quebec. Although it's interesting that the capital of Quebec is Quebec City, but the capital of the country, of course, is Ottawa, which is also in Quebec. So like they're two different things. So the funny thing was the fact that if Quebec seceded, it would lose Ottawa because Ottawa would at that point be a city-state part of Canada, the capital of Canada, within the territory of another country. It'd be one of the weirdest political situations on the planet where the capital of a country was actually inside another country. And what ended up happening, of course, this was in the 90s, and we were all following it because it was the closest thing we got, and only people in Quebec were intended to vote, and they could vote to secede. They, of course, a lot of people were like, I don't think they understand the ramifications or the potential, like whenever Texas or the southern states try to get a succession from the United States, I'm like, you realize that you don't get to say, you don't get the national debt. You get, this is your part of the national debt. You don't get access to the National Guard. Have fun. Like they don't get to just get free and clear. They have to take up their own responsibilities. And because Texas has a lot of isolated stuff, they can't rely on the rest of America to bail them out whenever their power grid fails, which happens a lot. But the Quebec referendum failed. Quebec voted to remain part of Canada, and the vote range was 51 to 49.
Ooh.
It came down to I think that might have been 52 to 48, but for the longest time, it was really close. But there's not been a serious secession vote since then. That was probably 30 years ago. But that was the last time. But in my opinion, as one famous historian said, there's nothing is written in any book that the United States has to last forever. And we're at that situation. We're in a situation where we're dealing with a country that is fracturing, and it's desperately trying to hold on to itself. And I imagine within 10 years, it's going to start to splinter, and we're going to start seeing gaps in that armor. And I think in situations like that...
Give me a second. Shall we just change the topic of the podcast to politics for tonight? Or because
you're right.
We've been going about 12 minutes, and give or take, and we've been talking about politics all the time. Well, not politics, but social issues as well. Because politics has nothing to do with queer shit, mates. Nothing. So anyway, let's go back to game, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, go back to game. I haven't done any gaming this week. I am absolutely and completely utterly bereft. The only gaming thing I've done is actually interviewing Graham Davis a couple of days ago, and he was amazing. And we talked about his Mythic Britain and Ireland for Free League, which sounds fantastic. And for a project that I am not going to say anything about yet, that's completely unrelated to the interview with Graham, by the way, I have been researching Spanish folklore over the last few days, and I've bought and read a couple of books on some Spanish creatures, and we have some interesting ones. Seriously, we have some very interesting creatures out there.
A lot of places have.
Yeah, but
I wonder how many of them were co-opted by Christianity.
A lot of them, but funnily enough, we still have a few who are benign.
Oh, really?
We have some who, and one of them looks really scary, but we have somebody, like, for instance, the Basahau, and that is a Basque mythological creature who is a man of the forest, similar to a Beorn kind of person, who actually helps people who get lost in the forests and look after the forests and the forest animals. But he's quite mean to poachers. So we have things like that. And we have a monk that bring presents to children who behave properly during Christmas time. So we have a lot of them. I'm really quite like, oh, okay. That looks quite horrific. We have something that has a chicken thing and a tail like a scorpion and horns like a bull, and it's a very bizarre, weird shit. It's horrendous. But we have some very interesting things. So yeah, I've been doing that. That's the only piece of related gaming thing that I've been doing over the last few days, which is terrible, but that's all I got. Sorry.
Oh, So, what's our topic then today? Are we talking about the board gaming conventions that I mentioned? Okay.
Yeah. Let's do that because let's face it, we are recording today is the 9th of May, or May the 9th, whatever you want to say date-wise, you people. And conventions are more upon us. Soon we have Compulsion, we have the UK Games Expo, and we have Consequences, and we're going to have Gen Con, of course, and Origins, and I don't know what's around you.
For me, so we have a local convention, which I'll go into at length. There is no local dedicated board game convention. There have been people who've tried and more or less have failed just because there hasn't been enough real push. Like you generally need a rallying cry, somebody who's willing to throw everyone together. And when that person fumbles or steps away, if no one picks up the slack, and it basically dies. And we have the near town of Kamloops has a gaming convention. Kelowna does not, but Kelowna has a regular nerd convention. So does Penticton. Vancouver, however, has both a fan convention and a board game convention. Their board game convention is one of the biggest, most well-known in the world. They have Shucks. So Shucks, which is the official convention of Shut Up and Sit Down, is based out of Vancouver.
And that's one of the best known in the world?
Well, you have Spiel, you have Gen Con, you have Gamma, you have PAX, and Shucks would be is easily in that top 5 or top 6.
Origins.
Oh, yeah, Origins. But Shucks is very, very big. It's bigger than you.
At Dice Tower Con.
No, I say Shucks and Dice Tower. I think Shucks is bigger. Shucks is bigger than Dice Tower Con. Dice Tower Con isn't as big as some people think.
I would have no clue whatsoever. I pay it.
Yeah, Dice Tower Con is neat, but it's very different than the other ones. Dice Tower Con is more about people getting together to play board games. Shucks, Shucks is similar to Gamma, Gen Con, and Spiel.
Okay.
In fact, sometimes more so than Gen Con, because when a convention ends, there's usually, here are the 2 or 3 games that everybody talked about, right? And Spiel is one of those where where a game can just explode.
Yes.
And everyone will talk about it. But Shucks is one where game publishers can have a full 3 days, or even 1 day for if you're an independent game. And so there is there have been situations at Shucks where a game comes out that everybody talks about.
Okay, fair enough.
And then everyone ends up playing, and then people talk about it at length and so forth.
Okay, so
for example, the last one we had, I'm just trying to do quick so if I can find out. Yeah, so the last Shucks was the one where Ready, Set, Bet exploded.
Okay, good.
Which is a game that a lot of people are talking about now. I saw it played at a local cafe, which I think is a topic in itself. And I found it interesting, but not my type of game, despite how we can see people were enjoying it. But I heard that it destroyed Shucks. Like Shucks, that was the only game people were talking about. So Shucks is the big one for that aspect.
But you know what? I much appreciate when that happens to the game, and I really think it's great for the game when that happens. But I always feel very sorry because, and people will argue with me about this, but when that happens, that is to the detriment of any other game out there. We may miss on some gems because we're only hearing about this one game. And
that's a very, very good point. And the problem is that it's I wouldn't say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but in this situation, it comes down to the company, like Ready, Set, Bet is not. It's like, oh, it's a small independent game. I'm like, no, it's not. It's done by a well-known designer. Have you seen this game, Ready, Set, Bet? By the way,
I have not.
Like I said, it is. I can't remember now who publishes it, but it's a real-time game.
Okay, that's why I haven't heard about it. I don't like real-time games. I kid you not. I have tried a number of them. There's only one real-time game that I do enjoy, which was published a very long time ago.
I'm 100%.
By Lion Publishing, I think it was, called Heroes. And the other reason I like that game is because it's a card game where you have to roll your dice in real time until you get a combination of dice. But the moment you get to that combination of dice, the game stops. It pauses, and then you can do something with your cards. You can either move them, or you can attack, or you can plan your strategy, and then it begins again. And the opposite player gets an advantage because the dice that they were setting apart are still set apart. So they start with advantage where you have to start from scratch. That's the only one. Yeah. But I've played Escape, and I've played a number of other real-time games, and they give me anxiety attacks. I'm not kidding. I really am not exaggerating.
You're not. Yeah, it's 100%. We're exactly the same situation. That's the reason why we didn't buy it. Because Nicole hates money and betting games, and we both hate real-time games. But it's the game is published by John D. Clare, who created Cubitos, Mystic Vale, and Space Base, which two of those we love. It's published by AEG, Alderac Entertainment. So it's again major designer, big publisher, and so at these events, most people are not going to notice. And the small pump, like that. So because we are most likely this year, there's a very decent possibility, in fact, it's almost a certainty, that I will be going to Shucks this year to sell Naramata, the board game. And I'm predicting that, I'm going to go there with my banner and my games, and it's going to be difficult to try to get noticed against the big players that are publishing. And it's always going to be very, very frustrating.
Have you considered, just wondering, have you considered to actually teaming up with a wine seller so you can sell some of the wines that are mentioned in your game?
Well, there's two answers to that. One is that my game's for sale in almost every single winery that helped us in BC. So that's one. But the way BC laws work, you need to get very, very special licenses to be able to sell alcohol, and Shucks guaranteed won't have that. So
what about getting together with somebody who sells wine complements instead? So, for instance, people who will get who will sell corkscrews, designer corkscrews, or designer decanters, designer bottles. That sort of thing. I mean, the reason I say this, and I know that it sounds like I am a little bit tipsy, which I am, not drunk, but I am tipsy, is because we have spoken about how going to conventions that have nothing to do with games sometimes actually help you sell games because it helps you get noticed. So I wonder if teaming up with somebody who's got nothing to do with games will have the same effect at a games convention.
Well, for me, like I said, the issue is going to be real estate. We get a table. That table is going to be 90% eaten up by the game itself, by the deployment of Naramata and so forth. So it's what my situation. I want to. It's interesting. Like we had a cross promotion at one convention with some hot sauce, and the hot sauce drew so much attention, no one bought the game. So even when we got a lot of people coming to our table, they were buying hot sauce and they weren't buying the game. And I want people to buy the game. So like I said, it's going to depend heavily on the next 2 or 3 months, because unfortunately we only have 3 more convention visits that we're going to attend this year. And both of them, I'm not expecting a lot out of that. And so we're still sitting on quite a few games. So we're probably going to be dumping the rest in distribution, but we may go down to Shucks for a day, sell what we can sell, and then dump the rest into distribution or find some other channel. But Shucks is, like I said, Shucks is the marketing type of board game convention. Dice Tower Con, the local one, CamCon, they're very much revolving around getting people together to play board games, and people aren't always bringing their wallets. But one thing I wanted to bring up, because there's different types of conventions. There's board game conventions, and they're growing. But like I said, there's two different types.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a game publisher, you just have to be a bit careful when you go to a board game convention what their format is. Because if it's just a massive space where people can play board games, and there's very limited space for vendors, which is what event I attended, you won't get any attention because everyone's focused on playing the big board game, and no one will be interested in buying a new board game, learning how to play it then and there as he finishes his glass.
Uh-huh.
The other one is similar to Spiel, similar to a traditional trade show, because Gamma and Shucks are trade shows. And that it's a trade show that's focused on board games, and that's a slightly different beast. And I would definitely recommend people, if you're trying to sell games, to try the trade shows that have a thematic connection. For example, if there's a wine trade show, I would go to that. It's something I want to take a look at, because there are wine trade shows, because BC has 385 wineries. And having that for sale would be something that would be avant-garde, something that's different. If, however, you go to a board game trade show, yeah, as you said, sometimes it's difficult to stand out amongst the big companies. The other, and then we get to the biggest issue, which are I would say, fan conventions. And fan conventions are Comic Cons, fan expos, and so forth. And these are big: San Diego Comic Con, St. Louis Comic Con, the Vancouver Fan Expo, the Calgary Fan Expo. These are colossal.
But they're very expensive, aren't they?
Well, you'd be surprised.
Really?
Getting a table there. Getting a table there is not as like getting a table at Shucks is very expensive. I would say getting a table at Shucks and getting a table at the Calgary Con. Calgary Con would be a bit more expensive, but not as much as you might think. The issue is you probably have a better chance selling product at Shucks. And there's two problems with conventions, fan conventions. One's like Vancouver, Victoria, Toronto, most definitely, and Calgary, and St. Louis, and the other big ones, is saturation.
Okay.
They don't care what they sell. They just want to fill up their space, and they will increase their space if they have to. As a result, you're talking like 600 to 800 vendors, and you're stuck with the same problem. How do you stand out? But the two big unique problems with a fan expo is people who show up to those events. Half, and now it's getting to be 60 to 70% in some cases, but at least half are in costume. They're going in cosplay.
Yeah.
And you have different ranges of cosplay, from like the absolute professionals to people who just bought something online and are wearing it. And cosplayers don't bring wallets.
No, they don't have pockets for that. I mean, where would Red Sonja or Conan keep their wallet? I mean, come on.
But in that same situation, they still have a place to put they give their ticket. But I mean that figuratively, in the fact that cosplayers,
I just had a really stupid thought.
Cosplayers, I would say 95 to 99% of cosplayers never purchase a thing because they're there to sell themselves.
Yes, exactly.
They're there to show off themselves. They are not interested in buying things for many reasons. They don't want to destroy the illusion of them carrying a bag of product while they're in costume, outside of whether or not it's logistically possible for them to even carry anything.
What do you mean?
But
Conan could carry anything, and Judge Dredd could carry
but
anything.
It might break the illusion if you're carrying a narrow amount of wine game as Conan walking around, and you can't really form your pose. The second big issue with FanCons, I said the first issue is the thing is, I know that the vast majority of attendants are cosplayers, and people then come to there to see the cosplayers, and it becomes this self-affirming little loop where more people go in costume to see other people to show it off, and then other people come so they can see the cosplayers. And so you have this very large contingent of people who come to a fan expo with no desire to spend any money. Mm-hmm. And fan expos, unlike a lot of trade shows usually have an entry fee of $5, $10, $20, because they've made so much money off the vendors, and it's more about The vendor's making money. And if you paid $50 to $75 to get into a convention, you're not necessarily.
Wait. Let me stop you there for a second. You pay how much to get into a convention?
For our local convention is $48 a day.
Wait. As a member of
Canadian.
the public.
Our biggest trade show, which attracts more people than FanCon, which is called Studio Fair, it will get 15,000 people a year. It does way better than FanCon. Everybody who comes into that event is there with money. Everybody walks out with bags of stuff. So in a weekend at FanCon, I can make $600, $700, but at Studio Fair, I'll make $3,000. To get into Studio Fair costs $5. To get into FanCon costs $38. And for a 3-day pass, it's $78, I think. But that is it. You're spending a lot of money to go in there, and people are there to see cosplayers, to see celebrities, to do panels. And so of the entire population attending a convention, I would say maybe 10 to 20% are interested in buying money, on spending money. And then on top of that, when you take that smaller quotient, the vast majority of that are not interested in bespoke and original content. They are looking for pop culture media. They want pops. They want Lego. They want things that they recognize. The idea of them coming in, like artists in Artist Alley, a lot of them never make a dime. They barely break even because most people aren't there for that. They want... So the game stores, the ones that are selling T-shirts, ones that are selling novelty caps or comics, they'll generally sell very, very well. But people selling original content, especially Artist Alley, I think Artist Alleys are really struggling, and they're going to struggle worse now because of issues with AI. But we're going to see an issue where artists are going to consistently lose money. And for me, the first Artist Alley we had was like 90% visual artists. Now it's almost entirely crafts. Our last FanCon convention, which I'll be talking about at length, I would say more than half. In fact, I think I was told that more than half of the convention the Artist Alley vendors were crafts, because you can't AI a mug, you can't AI a croquet something. So at least not yet. But the point is the fact that if you're a visual artist, you have to then be a celebrity. So people who come down like Bok Choy, Andy Poon, John Gallagher, who are the people, they can score because A, they're fantastic and they have an established name on top of that. You want an original John Gallagher and you pay for that piece.
You know what?
And that becomes an issue. So when we get down to the convention, you're looking at maybe 100, 200 people at a convention of 10 or so thousand that are actually interested in spending money at your table, which becomes very frustrating when you see so many people walk by with those little pop dolls or walking around in cosplay, and none of those people have any interest in spending any money at your table.
You know what? I can echo that, because I don't go to Spanish conventions because I want, as you know, nothing to do with Spanish geekdom, and I'm just can't be asked to mix myself with them. Which I know sounds very pretentious, but there are good reasons behind it.
Oh no, I know. Yeah.
So, but I have some good friends, Jessica and Alfonso, who do go to those conventions, and because they're very inventive, they create little D&D boxes, and they engrave wooden planks that they turn into coasters and mugs and what have you. They do their own thing. But they also published a couple of role-playing games, very small ones. And they sell a gazillion of their boxes and key rings and cushions, dice trays, and a little bit of their role-playing games. So I think you're absolutely right. The arts and crafts things, items and objects that cannot possibly be easily copied, that have a brand or some sort of level of authenticity attached to them, they tend to do very well in here as well. as long as the people behind them are nice, which my friends are. Because if you're an asshole, like other people who normally have booths around them, they don't sell much either. And Well, for those who actually do, I do that.
Yeah. There's, like I said, but for every one person that comes back, 9 of them I'll see walking by my table with handfuls of stuff. I go, and I'll go and say, "Oh, so I guess you are spending stuff today." But it was just one of those situations where someone says, and you also got to deal with the people that don't have a filter, that come in and they'll say, "Well, that's too expensive," or, "Why would anyone be interested in that? It seems like you're ripping this off," and so forth. So you have to then suffer those people. I didn't suffer. I don't suffer. I had some of that happen at the trade show last year. I didn't have anyone do that at the fan conventions. But the fan convention, I think during the 3 days of FanCon, I think I talked about the game 5 times.
That doesn't sound like many.
That's not many at all. Sold 2 games that weekend. Most of the sales were the RPGs and novels. The trade show, different story. I must have demoed that game 500 times. It was constant. My voice was going because I was repeating it. Now, that being said, a lot of people ended up not buying it, but I did have a few people who did. I sold about, I think, 16 or so games, which was low. So it's one of those situations where you kind of have to accept that and accept that type of rejection. I actually had I was surprised the number of people that were buying my novels this year. And the funny thing is that I know that if I shipped some ultra modern books to me, instead of dumping into distribution, I could attend this event and sell them. But I'm always in the same boat of like, yeah, but then I'll have these books that I can't sell. They'll be sitting on my shelf because you always get more than you need and you'll always be stuck with the excess stock. So it's always a little frustrating. But I had a hell of a bad encounter at FanCon, actually.
What happened?
Somebody, and this is the other issue, is that you also have to suffer the scenes, people that shouldn't be at conventions. And this is one of the things where my wife, God bless her, just can't do conventions. She won't do the local convention anymore. She won't. She stresses out too much. She always sees the same tables, and regardless of the celebrities that she generally gets a chance to meet, and I've met so many celebrities. I have a lot of photos, a lot of memories with well-known celebrities, some of which you may actually know. But the stress of talking to people, we've had vandals. We've not had them, but there's been stories of vandalism, people trying to steal product. That doesn't happen as much as often as you might think, but it has happened. Like, we will leave our product on our table when we go, and we've never had anything stolen, but some people have.
I have heard that, but in places like, for instance, Spiel. At Spiel, there is always, every single year, there's a little bit of story about somebody being mugged, but they don't get their products stolen very often. It is their money they go for because they sell a shit ton.
The cash box. Yeah. They try to steal the cash box. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, but like I said, it's something to be kind of accept. But then you have to deal with customers that are inflammatory. And I had a situation where there was, and if you have an event that has lax security or lax policy regarding certain things, it can prove an issue. And we had an issue last weekend where we had someone attend a convention who was once a volunteer, who got very big for his britches and tried to assume a second in command role to the organizer, and then proceeded to try to boss everyone else around, which the second in command did not appreciate. And this guy is a very big fellow. He's like 6'6", so he's very intimidating. And the way he talks, a lot of people are legit scared of him. And as a result of his height, he does use that to his advantage, even though he's always said he's not a violent man, but he will use his height as intimidation. And eventually he was told off, and he's never come back. But the thing is, he believes that his reputation was sabotaged. And of course, everyone's just like, no one sabotaged it. You did that entirely to yourself. So this happened 4 years ago. 2 years ago, he was rat-bagging the organizers and the convention people. And I went on and defended and basically said, because they've sabotaged my reputation. Well, this guy sabotaged my reputation. I said, no, that's not what happened. You know perfectly well what happened. Everything that happened was entirely your doing. And he got very aggressive with me, and he started saying names. I was like, well, I don't need to participate in your own ideas of abuse towards me, so bye. And I unfriended him. And I did not think of him for 2 years until he came into the convention on Saturday and started confronting other vendors, including the previous second in command from 4 years ago. Started making scenes, started getting aggressive. He wanted to pull me over and pull me into it, and I was not interested. My anxiety, my condition prevents me from wanting to engage people face to face, especially when you're dealing with some guy who's being very aggressive, very loud, and is 6'6". Somebody, the daughter of that guy in second command, she called the security because she has anxiety and she was getting scared for her family's safety. Eventually, forced security did show up. And the organizer, the second in command, the reason why he was second in command is he was also a first aid, a firefighter, and was trained in how to diffuse situations. So he diffused this angry person to prevent a violent outburst, and he eventually was escorted out. He then decided, once again, because this is an individual whose reality is defined by Facebook, proceeded to weaponize his social media and attack me online. Now, the only reason why I know this is that we have like 20 mutuals, well, 17 now, that then one of them I know defended me, and then they blocked him. But he proceeded to just lie incessantly about what happened, claimed that I called security, which I didn't. Wait a
second. You know that you wouldn't have done anything wrong if you had called security, right? So if that's the argument that he's using against you, that's like saying, I was robbing a shop and somebody called the police. How terrible of them.
Well, once again, this is somebody spinning their own interpretation of events, right? And so as a result, it's one of those situations where I'm like, you have to take the high road. And you might have seen a couple posts on my Facebook over the few days talking about FanCon and talking about how situations diffuse and how I won't like you will call people out. I can't. I need to take the high road because I am a publisher and I don't want to be seen doing that. Now, the horrible thing is the next day he came back in again and the event organizers allowed it. They told him he wasn't allowed to go into the specific area I was, but that he could go anywhere else. and I was in a workshop at that time. And as a result, a lot of people didn't know where I was. My wife was getting scared out of her mind because she was worried he was going to attack or confront me because I was away from that area where he wasn't allowed to go. And so when I finally returned, she was beside herself. She literally had to take yesterday off from work. She was so stressed out. And when I told the organizers, it felt very, very clearly their priority was to try to get as much money from attendees as possible. So they didn't want to kick anyone out. And then they said, don't worry, we have it under control. He's not allowed to come in your area. And I said, I am not going to be a slave. I'm not going to be a prisoner at this event. So I just packed up and I left. It was near the end of the event anyway. But the original organizer kind of understood. But it's one of those situations where I've said now that unless you can guarantee that you will have proper security and you can guarantee that this individual will be banned from then on, if you say we are not banning him, then I won't be attending that convention as a vendor or as an attendee. I don't make enough money to even justify it.
And I think you make a very good point about banning people entirely from conventions. Sometimes it happens that some people do something bad and they get banned from the convention, and there is an awful lot of backlash about, that is too much. Why did you, if somebody was playing a bad character at a playtest in a convention, why did you have to ban them completely? You can ban them from just playing. But you make a very good point in there that it doesn't matter if they're banned from playing, because the people they were playing with and the people around them who were affected or could have been affected might still, exactly, and they might still meet that person at the restaurant or at the vendors or at all the different type of game, because those people tend to stick around. Okay, I've been kicked out of that table for that game. I'm going to go to that other area where they don't know I've been kicked out from this area, and I'm going to stay there. So they could meet again, which could lead to some sort of either confrontation or simply to a unbearable discomfort for the victims who were around. So I think you made a very good point that you shouldn't be confined to just one place, which is the place where you feel safe that person is not going to be.
And that comes down to heavily about, we're talking about board games, and you mentioned it. If you have a bad actor, a bad player, a bad, whether it be a tabletop or an RPG, and this is something what could be another topic, but it's probably related. No gaming group should have to suffer an ass.
Absolutely.
But more often than not, and this is something I need to, that I make a rule, and some people have objected to it, and I say I don't care. I said that whenever people make player characters for my RPGs, I have one rule. You cannot play an asshole. And this, you may think like that should be obvious. It's not. The number of times I've had players, experienced players, intentionally create someone who was going to cross swords with other players in an aggressive way because they find it fun. Because either they want to troll the other players or they think that's the character they want to play. And this has been, there was a meme that came around about somebody who does something really horrific. And then when they call them out on that, or that person gets objected when he does or says something that's toxic, and everyone responds understandably, their excuse is, well, that's what I'm just playing my character. And then the end of that meme was, who you play, it does not give you an excuse to be an asshole. So if a lot of people, it's interesting the number of times in role-playing games, and the problem with these tabletop conventions is that when you play D&D by yourself, or with your own group of friends, you're your friends. You know exactly what to expect. When you are sitting down running a game, this is one of the reasons why I have real issues running blank RPGs, adventures for strangers, because you never know what you're going to get. And so I've run several modules at these conventions, more or less about books that I have published. I am thankful to say that I have not met anyone toxic, but I know people who have. And no convention has to suffer it. And if you are a convention organizer and you see a player being rowdy, you are obligated as a convention organizer to go in and go, I don't care what kind of character you think you're playing. You don't act that way at this event. And part of that is actual responsibility of the GM. A GM also has to understand that they need to put their foot down if they have a rowdy player. But at convention, sometimes you get 4 players, and if you kick one out, your game can't play. But you have to be able to make that stance, especially at a convention where you are a GM. Yes. You are there to do something for the session. They need you. They need you there to run that game.
Well, we had we had a similar issue a few years ago, pre-pandemic, at a huge convention. Huge. It's about 1,000, 1,500 people conventioning here in Madrid, where I think somebody was looking for a fight. Okay. And there was a player, and apparently this player's character was annoying, but it was just that, annoying. And another person, a woman with a disability who is notorious for creating ruckus in Twitter,
right,
had a go at him when the game was about to end. It was still going on. Was about to end, and she ended up throwing a bottle of water on the other player because the other player, he wasn't playing as she wanted him to play. The GM did nothing about it.
Oh, geez.
Nothing at all about it. And you know what happened at the end? It's pathetic. She was told not to say anything, so they wouldn't have to call the police because she had assaulted somebody. So the publisher, who was sponsoring that table with their game at the time, said to the victim, here, you have some games, please say nothing about this. They went to the woman and said, hey, here, have some games, sorry this happened, say nothing about this, let's not make an issue.
Yeah.
The guy didn't say anything, and she went on to Twitter to explain how he was harassing her and how she was forced to defend herself. And even though multiple accounts came after that to defend him, not her, absolutely nothing was said about the GM, who is the person who should have stopped the whole thing well before it started. So yes, the GM has a responsibility.
Yeah. And so the GM has a responsibility, but that also being said, sometimes in that situation, you want to make sure you have that backup. Now, in the case of this situation, the security was called, 2 guys showed up, realized they were dealing with a guy that was a foot taller than them, because a lot of these security guards aren't very tall. And eventually it ballooned to 4 people. Which he mocked on his post. He mocked the fact that he was surrounded by a bunch of people that were all a foot shorter than him. He was making fun of their potential capacity. And I'm a person just like, well, if he had thrown a punch or done something aggressive, he would have seen very, very quickly how 4 security guards could annihilate him, because they wouldn't be just 4. It would be about 10 or 12, because there were a lot of people. And when you assaulted, and this is one thing I will say I like about vendors. There are very few vendors that are jealous about other vendors, especially in Artist Alley, very specifically, to the point where when this situation was happening and they eventually escorted out, almost every vendor around me came up to me and going, are you okay? Do you need any help? I'm like, I'm fine, but appreciate it. But these were people that were curious, people I didn't know. And the funny thing was that situation is that they had to be called because most of these places have limited security. Now, that being said, in board game conventions, you're generally dealing with a large space. And as a result of that, it should be relatively easy to spot what happens. So, yeah, the GM could make a statement, but when you're dealing with someone who's toxic, at the end of the day, you need organizers to come down and sometimes employ security to do it. The first board gaming convention I attended had no security. because this smaller convention did not have the funds. And now I'm in a situation whenever I see a gaming convention, I will, or any convention at all, I will ask, is there security? And if they say no, I'll say, well, I'm not going to attend your event. What do you do when you deal with toxicity? Because here's the thing. Vendors have this issue.
Okay, wait a second. Let me intercede, because otherwise I will lose the trend of what you're saying, and there's something I need to contribute to this. I'm not entirely in agreement with this, because security costs a lot of money. And to be perfectly honest, I think that what is the police should be there for, to be called when something happens that shouldn't be happening. So I reckon that, as far as I'm concerned, and considering the experience I had with the UK Games Expo on the last few years when I attended, and one of the reasons why we kind of fell off is because they would refuse to have a code of conduct. And as far as I'm concerned, the code of conduct is even more important than having a security presence in there, because the code of conduct is what's going to give whatever security measures you take, whether they are volunteers who can intercede on behalf of vendors or attendees, or whether it is the police when you call them. The code of conduct is what's going to define whether you can stop somebody from doing whatever it is they're doing that you don't want them to do. And a code of conduct covers things that are not necessarily contemplated in the law, like taking photographs of people who specifically have to tell you they are okay with you taking their photographs, or having to leave premises when you're told this talk is over, or when somebody tells you, I'm having a drink with my friends, just leave me alone. Those things need to be covered by a code of conduct. So as far as I'm concerned, I think it's a lot more important that not necessarily who the security forces are within the convention itself, because again, official, proper, security firms are expensive and you cannot always afford them. But who can you talk to who will help you get rid of the threat, whether it is by means of the organization itself or by calling the police on your behalf if you identify somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing. So I think there is a balance to be stricken, and it's a matter of what safety measures there are, not necessarily what policing forces are.
And these are probably very regionally specific. Like, I hate to be the one to say that, but if we call the police because of somebody rowdy at a convention, it's probably gonna be a half hour, 45 minutes before they show up. So you're dealing with a considerable amount of wait time for someone who could do a lot of damage. And the other issue is that because of certain policies, like for example, security, it's kind of funny. A lot of local security are not actually trained, and or they are not even obligated to physically restrain someone. They're there to be a presence, but they are not required to be physical with someone. And as a result, the same thing comes with volunteers. Volunteers are not allowed to be physical with people. So you actually have to get a situation where you have people that have to take matters into their own hands. If you dealt with, like, for example, if this guy decided to be violent, the security would have moved in, because if they just stood back, everyone would be asking what's going on. Police are trained to do that, but it's more as a discouragement. I don't know what would happen if this guy had thrown a punch. I'm pretty certain that, once again, there are enough. I have a lot of friends, and most of the people at that artist alley know me, respect me, and some of them are good friends. There wouldn't be much of a delay before about 8 or 9 people would have jumped in if security hadn't. But that all being said, I think, code of conduct is important, but there has to be some form of enforcement, even if it is volunteers that are stepping forward to be bouncers or what the case may be. Conventions, especially fan conventions, it's becoming more mandatory, and I do mean mandatory. And you hit the nail on the head, and that is cosplay is not consent, which is a very a big dominant now. Yeah. And that's why code of conduct is mandatory at these fan conventions, and that's why in many ways security absolutely has to be involved, especially in a fan convention. A board game convention, maybe less so. but you need to have a code of conduct, and you need to have people that are willing to enforce that conduct.
Well, the things are in Spain at least, and I believe in the UK as well, things are slightly different, because even though you're absolutely right, you are not allowed to put a finger on anyone, even if you are a security officer, as in a private company. But you are allowed to defend yourself, and you have the legal rights as a citizen to stop somebody from leaving some premises, and you can restrain someone and do what's called a civil arrest until the police arrives, and then they can take over. So if somebody, for instance, throw a punch on me, I could defend myself to the point. I wouldn't be able to assault them back unless it was in defense, in real self-defense. But I would be able to try and restrain them and keep them restrained until the moment the police comes in. So from that point of view, the organization can do something. They can intervene, even if it is to restrain the aggressor. Whether it is something they're willing or they're trained to do is a different matter altogether. But if somebody is caught violating a code of conduct and doing so in a violent, aggressive manner, then you don't have to wait for the police. You can restrain the individual until they arrive.
One of the reasons why I wanted to pursue a writing career, primarily, reason number one was to try to start my career doing what I love. Second reason is that I hated my job. And my job was that, and this is brings back a quote from Lord of War, when somebody asked Nicolas Cage, who is an arms dealer, do you enjoy doing what you do? And he says, no. And someone asks, then why do you do it? And he says, because I'm good at it. I worked retail, electronics retail for 30 years. And especially when it comes to sales, I have a very specific technique that's non-invasive, that's very friendly, and has resulted in some situations where, like I said, the last, when I got a job at Staples, selling extended warranties, I sold more extended warranties than anyone in the country, not the province, the country. And with that, I enjoy that, but I don't enjoy who I have to talk to in order to get those numbers. Although I love the vast majority of customers, I also have to deal with the physical confrontations. And when I was at Superstore, which is kind of the Canadian version of Walmart, but in some ways worse, I was part of the security detail. So when a code 55 or code 77, 55 was almost 77, which was security needs assistance. And then anyone who was a security team, which is generally volunteers like myself and or managers on duty, would have to hightail to that location, because chances are the single loss prevention officer for the entire store is confronting somebody either very big or somebody who's already causing a physical altercation. And I had needles pulled on me, and I have been in a wrestling match with a guy and 3 other people. Me and 2 other security people basically wrestling with a guy who was trying to get away. And it was it's one of those situations where I didn't have to volunteer, but the guy who was doing it was a friend of mine. And I've been in situations, and the funny thing is that we've had to confront very, very big people. Thankfully, a guy named Doug, who was the grocery supervisor, who was on the security detail, is 6'10" and 300 pounds. And one of the most hilarious things was when somebody tried to make a run for it, and they literally ran into him. And it was like a scene from Princess Bride, and he was Andre the Giant. Somebody ran into him. He didn't move, and the guy fell on the ground. It was actually one of those hilarious moments. But point is, I really cannot deal with that level of anxiety confronting people, shoplifters, and getting into those physical altercations. So for me, if something like were to happen, like you said, I would defend myself. But I'm a person that really hates the idea of getting into confrontation, and which is the reason why I refused to engage this individual at the event. And also because this guy was making a scene, and every second somebody stands in front of your table making a scene is a second that you're not making sales, which becomes
that's the purpose of you being there, really.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those situations where I think people need to be very, very careful.
Fair enough. Good. Well, we have spoken an awful lot about our experiences in conventions and dealing with.
I had one guy. We were setting up a convention, talking about stories, and I saw a guy running full belt. We're talking like full belt, and he was doing laps around the convention center. And this was before we opened. And I'm looking at this guy. I thought he was like running because he had to get somewhere. And then 30 seconds later, he ran past me again. And I'm like, okay. And then I got to continue working, and then he ran by me again, and then again. And I was just like, "Where are you going?" And he ignored me, evaded me, and kept on running. And I started looking at people and going, "Okay." So I call up my friend, who once again is the guy that was originally getting accosted when he was second in command, because once again he was the fire guy, he was the first aid guy. So I called him up, going, "We might have a problem at Kin 1, which is the center." He's like, "I'll be right there." And this guy, I think we tried to stop him, and he would get around us and keep on running. And this is now 5 minutes of him constantly running, doing laps. And eventually, Daryl, the guy's name, shows up, and we tried to stop him, and he won't. He just keeps on running, and we waited for him to come back. And at that point, we quite literally tackled him to stop. And we found out that he was high, and somehow, like, he was completely high. I don't know what drug cocktail he was on that got him to get into this looping action, but he would have probably ran until he dropped, and we had to hold him until he calmed, and we called the paramedics and picked him up. So yeah, there are stories that I've at conventions.
Well, maybe for another time, because we've been at it for well over an hour now. I'm not entirely sure what this episode's being all about, because we started with a purpose and we've gone way over something else.
No, we were talking about gaming conventions and the do's and don'ts and the positive and negatives, and talking about our bad experiences at conventions are part of that whole ordeal.
My God, no, believe me, I haven't spoken about my bad experiences at conventions. If I did, I would need a whole episode just for myself. Trust me.
No kidding. No kidding.
So anyway, humans, assuming you are one, who've been there listening, watching these two handsome men talking about their experiences and again, conventions. Thank you very much indeed for being there. Please do get in touch if you are so keen, so kind to do so on podcast at gmsmagazine.com. I promise that I will try to resume by gaming as soon as possible, so I can keep reviewing more and more Asian games. But this week's just being absolutely mental. And next week, I have a neighbors association meeting. So I don't know, pardon me, if I will be able to play or not, but I will try. I promise I will try. And this Saturday coming is Eurovision Song Contest. If you have never heard of that, your life is not complete yet, please go online, search for it, and watch it. And you can thank me later. Find me on Twitter. I am at GMS Magazine. And on Facebook, I am also at GMS Magazine.
And this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. You'll find me at Deus Ex Machina on all social media platforms.
See you next week.
See you next week.